Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Sri Lanka's first LinkedIn live talk show, Cinnamon Chat with Amita. Today it is 48th number when it comes to the episodes. Imagine I have been doing this for last 48 weeks. That's about how many months? So many months. So there would have been ups and downs, network issues, but there would have been lockdowns, but then I have been continuing. And today it's going to be a special one because we are going to talk about startups, we are going to talk about meetups, and we are also going to talk about the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka. So before I invite our guest today, let me talk about this show a little bit. This is Sri Lanka's first LinkedIn live talk show. My name is Amita Gamage, and I'm an executive coach. I'm a personal branding strategist, and I help organizations improve their B2B sales by working with the teams. What else do I do? I do a lot of things, but for this show, this is good enough. So, who is the person I have invited today? He's a very special person who has seen a lot. That's one reason why I wanted to invite this person, because he has witnessed too much of things happening in the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka. So these things should be documented somewhere. So he's also a person who documents everything that's happening in the Sri Lankan ecosystem. But then somebody should document about what he knows as well. So I thought I would invite him to the show. Uh, I know him for a very long time. Let me invite Inosh. Inosh, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Amita. Absolute pleasure to be here, and I'm really happy that you considered me within the first 100th episode. So I'm one of the people who were considered. So I at least have that privilege and that honor. So thank you for having me here, Amita.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about a lot. So uh, I would like to welcome my friends who are joining on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. We are on all three platforms. If you have any questions towards Enosh, about his personal story, his professional story, yeah, not only that, any other question that you want to ask about startups, meetups, and of course, the startup ecosystem in Sri Lanka, to know more from him, what he has witnessed. So I generally dig into the past of those guests who come here. So, I also would like to ask about, how did you start I'm talking about your school, university life, that era, your college life, maybe. You want to say something? Are you from Colombo?
That's a good question. Since you want to dig into the past and start off with that, I'll share a very interesting story for the audience who joined here. My very first recollection of meeting Amita here is we have a mutual friend called Sharanyan, and then we used to he I think he was one of the key personalities who did a show called actually a startup event called Startup Weekend. So lots of plannings later, he invites us to the northern part of Sri Lanka. We all went to Avnia, and then the typical signature style of Sharanyan is get everyone to jog in the morning at 6 o'clock, wake up, wake up the people, tap all the room doors, and wake up people, and just for us to go jogging. So we all got out, started jogging, and there was this one very young person who was leading the pack, jogging non-stop into 2 kilometers, and we suddenly was like, who is this person? And then I think that's where we actually struck conversations. We had some amazing pictures. I even yesterday or day before I came across those pictures. Really good memories. And then I think ever since I personally have been talking to Amita a lot. I've gone for advisors. I've asked him for him to advise on certain decisions that I made, and certain things to give his comments. So for him, for me, it's more like Amita is one of my mentors who I hold very dearly close to me. Uh, So yeah.
Thank you for that introduction. We must go back to Vavnia and run in the morning with Charanyan one day
Oh
soon.
yes,
Yeah,
and I remember the grass juice as well.
yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back
So
to the
yeah.
topic, your history.
Yes, so I have been born in Colombo, brought up in Colombo. So yeah, maybe that is a little bit of a privilege associates with me. So I initially started my schooling at St. Thomas's Prep, and then went to Lyceum for my A levels. The reason why I went to Lyceum is because it was close by to my house, and it was just about 5 minute three-wheeler ride.
Oh,
So that was easier because if not, I would have still wanted preferred to continue at St. Thomas's. And I finished my A levels and I went to ACBT to do my degree. And yeah, I think probably at ACBT is where I kind of started mingling with a lot of people, started exploring my who I was in terms of my personality, and got into a little bit of extracurricular activities. Got involved in singing, playing guitar, did quite a few shows. So I think I kind of discovered the edge, like a bit of more of my personality at college. So yeah,
okay.
that was my early days in school and college.
Brilliance. Yeah, so then university life, internships, what happened there?
University life was pretty good because I think throughout you being in a boys' school and then suddenly going to Lyceum and then going to university, it was like completely different, and it was quite nice. I think in a way when I look back now, it's even I feel that it was good that we got that exposure because we were able to handle situations much better later on at a social setting, which kind of gave us a lot of exposure into, because from switching schools from St. Thomas's to Lyceum gave a lot of exposure into different types of personalities, different types of people, and you need to adapt immediately. So
Yep.
your A levels is about 2 years, so you need to adapt to people. From that, then going into college, and then that gave a quick another shift, and then you need to adapt into situations. So I was, as much as possible, I was the probably the common guy for all the clicks. So I'm like the guy in between, which when people want to
Catalyst.
talk, like more than the catalyst, the messenger. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
and then internship. I went to, soon after my college. I got an opportunity through a referral. I went to John Keel's stockbrokering. This was the time then stockbrokering was like flying off the roof. So I
okay,
had, I think, about 3 month, three or 4 month stint at stockbrokering as well.
okay. And then you want to share how did it go? Like, what was the experience at the stockbrokering? Because I know now you are not a stockbroker, so I don't know. I want to know what happened.
Uh, Stockbrokering, I think one of the main things that I realized was numbers was not for me. I realized, man, this is because uh, surprisingly I scored really well for my O levels, A levels, and everything. I did well with maths, but maths is completely different to finance. You think and breathe numbers is kind of different. So once I went into stockbrokering, uh, completely new world. And one specific incident is like since uh, people inside the stockbrokering, they saw that I'm able to communicate well. I'm quite friendly with people, and they kind of assume that okay, I might be a good character to become a stockbroker. So without prior experience or anything, they immediately put me into
The
the
flow.
interview process.
Okay,
Before the flow, they put me onto the interview process to kind of screen me and then get me in. I
okay,
think I probably failed really hard in the interview process. They really caught my bullshit. I didn't know some basics fundamentals of finance. I didn't know who the finance minister was. It was to quote it, it was a shit show inside the interview. And then I kind of uh, they kind of realized, okay, I don't fit in here. Because before that, I think I realized I still got back to my internship. I was continuing my internship, but I kind of realized, okay, if I'm not going to have a future here, It's no point putting a lot of time here. And then I kind of moved on from there onwards.
Okay, brilliant. Then I'm sure you completed everything, and then you wanna say anything about your first real job? You entered the corporate world just like most of us.
Yes, and I consider that as a privilege. So since I kind of got to know a little bit of myself, I kind of discovered about myself in terms of I'm able to communicate fairly
Well,
well, and then have some good relations with people. After stockbrokering, I kind of realized, okay, I need to go into something which is very network and people oriented. I think for my luck, probably one of the best experiences that I can go through. I got the opportunity to join the Dialogue Key Client Services. So they have a separate division which they cater to the cream of the crop of Colombo, like high net worth
individuals.
individuals.
Yep.
So I think to just give an idea of who these people are, they back then roaming was big, right? So people
Yep.
used to go on roaming, and the bill is like some crazy amounts, like calls outgoing, incoming. It comes to about 200, 250, 300 rupees. So some of these people's their bills, monthly bills, come to like 700,000, 1 lakh, sorry, a million.
Yeah.
And some people who have arrears goes plus 2 million, 2.5 million, they have arrears. And then I also got to interact with some of the celebrities like cricketers, some musicians, and it was more of a first name basis. It was very
Yeah.
new, so it's like you need to maintain your professional, like you're still doing a job, and then you need to maintain. I mean, you can't go fanboy on people, so you need
Yes.
to maintain your professionalism. But I also, because I got access into these kind of people's, maybe a little bit into, I got a peek into their lives. I got to see how they live, their lavish lives. When I get to some people, they request you certain things done. When they're not at office, they say, okay, why don't you come home? So we take the office transport, go home, and get some documents sorted. You see all these lavish houses with multiple swimming pools, and it's just beyond imagination. I think it's sometimes sometimes more lavish than the hotels that we go to.
Yeah.
uh, and certain incidences, like one-off incidences, like there was one particular cricketer who just called, and he was supposed to play the bill, which I called and told, hey, there's some arrears. He just came, in a jeep. He just came in front of the office. So just before he crossed, about 30 seconds before, he said, Malli, I'm just going to cross this place, could you come out? So I went out. He was just, the vehicle was still moving, right? The moving, and the fully tinted shutters, the shutter rolled down, the car is still moving, shutter rolled down, and he just almost like flipped 500,000 bundle. He just flipped it like this. I just caught it. Obviously he was a cricketer, so he expected me also to be able to catch. But for me, that was almost like a shock, because that was the first time that I kind of held that kind of money. I even saw that kind of money, and I was thinking, okay, do these people even value for this money? Like, do they even have a value for this money? And those kind of small things gave me a lot of experience. There were certain things which we can't even discuss here. Like, I got to know
Yeah.
behind the scenes of people, of their lives, and what they do. So yeah, I think that gave a good experience, the early the first job that I went to.
Okay, so this is where you realize that you could actually use your people skills very much, and then the organization also was using it. Brilliant. So when did this I need to do something on my own, that moment, that the triggering moment, what happened?
So again, I think that also, because I told you that this was one of a kind of place that I joined, which kind of gave everything. It gave the exposure, it gives the learning, it gave different incidences for me to learn from, and also it gave the realization through certain. I mean, through that entire period, it gave the realization, okay, this doesn't suit me. This is not the place that I am going to be in. And it slowly gave more and more realization of, oh, okay, I need to be doing something on my own, because I tend to set rules for myself. I'm kind of, I'm not too happy taking orders. I want to, like, set my own rules. So how I kind of got to know that was when I went into this job role, I used to kind of set up framework. So this is like, I'm just, a junior, right? I
Yeah.
the first time. So this is again also the influence of immediately, getting shipped from university to an organization. You're thinking everything on a theoretical basis. You're like, theories, formulas. You're looking at organizational structure, and I get all my chapters which I learned. So I'm like looking at, okay, these are the stuff that we can do. Here's the structure. So what I did was, without even being asked, I observed for 3 months, and I started doing a report. Something similar to what I did for my report at this module as well. I started doing a report. Now, for me, it was more interesting because it's a real life scenario. I get to see day in, day out. I get to see how things are happening. So even from minor things like, okay, do we need to take printouts for these kind of things? Do we need to keep the printer here? I think there was one case study which also says, like, even the movements you need to make it
Yes,
efficient. So
reduce.
so I was kind of strategizing on that level also. Okay, can we move the printer here, because people, there is much more flow of traffic. There is no people blocking, because
Yes.
even the printer also was blocking the kitchen. So people who kind of go for a tea or take a teacup and come out, they kind of stand there for about 2 minutes. What I felt was, it was a welcome break for them. They were like purposely staying there. Like, they don't even ask people to move. They just stay there just to enjoy that additional 2 minutes. So what I was thinking was, okay, how to make this process efficient. From the minor thing to that, from movement of objects to even things like, okay, do we need to have these type of documents? Do we need to collect these type of information from our clients? I did a report and submitted to the management. For about 2 3 months, I didn't hear anything. They said, like, okay, this is like definitely a first time somebody's given a report to us. We'll go through it and get back. So after about 2 3 months, the boss called me inside the office and said, I want to talk to you. So I went in and sat down. Now I had no clue what this is. So I thought I'm going to get fired for something. So the boss said, okay, we went through your report. It's quite interesting. Actually, this is quite effective in terms of for us to implement as well. We want you to get involved in something else as well. We have another report coming up. Can you get involved? So I said, yeah, definitely. So immediately I was walked out, and then I was put into the meeting immediately. Soon after that
Immediately.
meeting, I was put out and then put in another meeting. That meeting was the manager, assistant manager, and people like that, all the big people. And then I'm the only junior guy.
Okay.
And then I was asked to do a report. Later on, I realized that I was put there not because my beautiful intelligence of creating reports, but it was just that I was able to write well, and they wanted a writer to put the report together, and they wanted me to do their annual reports, which they are going to submit. So I kind of realized, okay, that gave me an insight into, okay, probably I'm better at writing.
Yeah.
uh, that also gave me an insight into, okay, if you're at an organization, you're not used for your skills that you want to put out. You get used for other people's work. So that also I kind of realized. Plus, I didn't have control of, I can only suggest, I can't implement. Those kind of things gave me an idea of, okay, maybe something on my own is something that I need to do. And even when I went to meet people like business people, I mean the key clients, when I met business people, I listened to their stories as well. I just asked their stories. And people in PETA and all, they just say, I just started off with nothing. Then that kind of gave me a bit of insight into, okay, why don't we also start doing something?
Yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
the trigger point was, they also had a magazine, a tech magazine, which was purely full of almost 80% of advertisements. So when I was kind of venturing out and then thinking about this idea, I thought, okay, why not do a tech magazine which is of 80% content, and reduce a lot of the advertisement. Why not flip it around and give this as this thing, because there was a lot of demand for a tech magazine back then. But it was the right gap was not identified and provided. So I think that's what we also felt we need to dive into.
Okay. Amazing. Okay, so you got into new media, and it was more or less digital, or was there a printed version of it, or when you originally started?
So again, that's a funny story, because we actually wanted to start with print. But very early on, this was the time period where even ICTA was kicking up and getting active. There was a bit of early programs like the LAN hackathon, the venture engine, and things like that were happening. And through some connections, we got connected to one of the investor groups. So
Okay.
when we went for one of the first meeting, it was just a very casual meeting. That's when one of the investors, listened to idea and they said, "Okay, this is brilliant. We would like to get involved with you." And they said, "Okay, why are you looking at print? Because the world is moving towards iPads and iPhones. Why looking at print? Why don't you make digital? Because you are doing a digital magazine. Why not look at digital?" So I think that kind of influenced us to also think, okay, if you're doing it digital, why not look at digital? So we kind of completely scrapped away the idea of going into print, and we immediately started thinking digital. In a way, I think it helped us also because our costs were very low. We didn't have any heavy capital expenditure, and digital also, it was easy for us to move into because during that period was when Facebook and Twitter was getting popular in Sri Lanka, and that was the time when corporates started giving notice to these platforms, and they started incorporating. It's almost similar to corporates now looking at TikTok. Back then it was a time period when corporates were looking at, okay, what is this new platform? Lots of people are talking about it, everybody's using it, we need to get into it, but we don't know how. But back then at least nobody knew what social media is. So people who were able to operate social media, they were kind of they were the geeks, they were kind of seen as these magicians who are able to do stuff.
Yeah.
So that gave us more inroads into offering our services as well.
Okay. Interesting. So let's say hi to Fazli, who always, every week he makes sure that he comes here. Hi, Fazli. Thank you for coming today also. He never misses a single episode.
Loyal,
Uh,
loyal fans. Amita's
yeah,
loyal
loyal
fans.
fan. Yeah, yeah. And what he says, they learn a lot because of the people who come and share their experiences here. So, so naming, you named it as readme.lk.
Yes.
Is there a story? Is there a funny story behind it?
Story behind it, actually, we came up with that name is because if you remember back in the day, software files had something called the readme file. It's to get to know about the software. It's like a user manual for the software in the readme file. So we kind of thought, okay, we need to be the user manual for the IT industry, the startup industry, and we named it as readme. So I think we got together with some really amazing people, and I think that operation started off really well. It was flourishing too fast, too soon. It was like really like one of the most fun times to be in back then.
Okay, so I also want to talk about your transformation from readme.lk to articulate.asia. Right? You want to say what made the transformation, why articulate Asia from readme.lk, you know, uh, the whole transformation story.
Yeah. So it's two different entities. So Articulate Asia is completely different because the outlook and what it's trying to achieve is slightly more regional focused. And how this started happening was, I think for quite too long we were focusing in Sri Lanka, and we realized that I think we realized too late that this market is too small, and we kind of realized, okay, there is a lot happening in the region, and then we need to kind of take a regional approach and then have Sri Lanka as one part of it, because after some time being here for quite some time, we realized, okay, things are not picking up. There is always a cap because your audience is small. People who value these kind of things are very small, and people who are thinking in this kind of mindset is also small because early days, there is multiple initiatives. Even when you take from a governmental kind of point of view, also I think multiple projects initiate and then they suddenly wrap up.
Yeah.
If you take early days, those days when you take startups and tech companies also, I think it's more of a half-hearted effort, like they just only put 1 feet into purely going to digital and explore the digital area. Even out of that, people who have the concept of paying for digital content also was very alien back then. it was considered, okay, is this something that you need to pay for, something like that.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of challenging period early in those early days. I think multiple digital platforms also came and they perished. I can count about 2 to 3 platforms which, like, stayed for about 2 years, stayed for about 3 years. They gave a good fight and kind of perished. I think we were just lucky. We just, stuck around, and then we were able to kind of, survive. But other than that, I would say it was very, very challenging. The industry is still challenging, but right now, I would say the good thing is, we consider that competition is bad. So every time a competition comes, we always take the competitive approach. We go head on. That's what we did with the earlier players who came. But there was a period when all the competitors were perished, and then we were alone in the market. We realized we were not doing anything new. We were, like, just lethargic. We were just, doing the same old services, and we were like just getting our paychecks. Nothing new was happening. And then some of these platforms started coming up, like Row and Pulse, and Yamo was there from very early on. We realized, okay, something new is happening. Like, when platforms are coming in, we are recognized as an industry. When there is
Yeah.
no players in the industry, you're not an industry. You're just some random person doing some random thing. So
True.
it kind of gave us more perspective that, okay, we don't need to chase people out. We need people in. And those days when we, like, pitch for services with clients, we say, okay, why we are better than someone else. That's how we pitch.
Yeah.
Now we don't do that. We are like, if a client wants to work with, all of them, like, all our people who are in the industry, we love it, because for us, when a client recognizes players in this industry, that's a, like, a really good thing for us, man, because they recognize there is an industry like this. So the transition actually came because we want to look at a regional approach, not spend too much of time, growing too slow, but look at it from a different point of view. Why not start from Asia and then come back into Sri Lanka? So we actually started setting up in Cambodia. We had some operations set up or planned in Malaysia as well. This was just before COVID. I traveled there for about 2 or 3 times. Amazing experiences. And I think 2020 March was my scheduled trip to go there to kind of officially start the operation.
Some
Uh,
physical operation.
Actually, so we wanted to have it physical operation because I kind of, for me also personally, I believe that, okay, whatever digital we do, that human interaction does make a lot of sense, because we were also starting with some known people which I got to know. I was traveling there for about 2 or 3 times. I got to know some real people, and we kind of connected really well. And those connections helped us. They showed us the way. They showed us how to incorporate. They gave us, connections to partners. So we had like an infrastructure set up to start. We even had like an office with about 4 desks and tables in, like, like the third floor of a mall. Right below is a Starbucks. So for us, it was like, wow, we are just going to have a new new beginning. But lockdown happened, and back to square one, back to the drawing board.
Yeah. We'll say hi to another usual fan, Tamit. Tamit comes every week here from Panadura side. Hi, Tamit. Thank you very much. Good evening to you. And I just want to ask you another one. Articulate.asia covers like what countries? I mean, I know it's Asia, but then you have any special emphasis into any area, any industry, or any country, or say a little bit about that.
So the whole idea is to look at Southeast Asia, Southeast Asian countries,
Okay.
maybe look at ASEAN. We have very special interest in Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar, that area as well. And so it doesn't directly fall into either Southeast Asia, or it doesn't directly fall into ASEAN. There are a few countries, and the reason is we want to kind of tap into the countries which shows a lot of potential, but not a lot of media and storytelling activities happening. Because if you take from a regional perspective, there are maybe 1 or 2 players who are active in the high performing countries like Singapore and Malaysia,
Yeah.
Indonesia. So we want to kind of, okay, let's not go like head on, because the market is quite large and there is room for more people to get in. So rather than going into somebody else's niche and tapping into that and creating competition when we don't have the muscle at the moment, because some of these players who are in the market already, they also started their journey about 10 years earlier, and they have kind of kept at it and grown over the period. So now
Yeah.
they are like massive teams, and they have a lot of capital, they have a lot of investors. So we were looking at, so actually that wasn't the focus. We thought, okay, why not look at emerging countries, the smaller countries which are showing a lot of potential. So that's why we are looking at those kind of countries. And I think Cambodia is close to heart, because that's almost like Colombo. Everything you see
Yes.
there is almost like Colombo, because you see the sudden buildings coming up. You see people are
Yeah.
getting used to the locals are getting used to this modern lifestyle. But I
I
would
was
say Cambodia is yeah,
I was there for twice. I was there twice, and I know. I really enjoy that country. I don't know.
exactly,
If
yeah.
there's another opportunity tomorrow, I might go there again.
Definitely, definitely. And I think it's like it's more like the best way to describe Cambodia is like it's Colombo on steroids.
Yes.
It's like everything is like Colombo, but it's super fast paced. Like you just
Yes.
sleep and wake up. There's two buildings right in front of
Yes.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So let's get into that subject also parallelly, right? So your involvement in startups from the early stages, and probably along with the earlier magazine, you also were getting involved in startup, or you have being witnessing startups. So what was your involvement from the beginning?
So, to be honest, I mean, these were words that we kind of got to know later on. So, we didn't have words for these back then. Like, we didn't know what startups were, we didn't know what hackathons were, we didn't know what investment and all these things. So, these were like, it happened and we know it happened. So, we didn't have a term for it, we didn't have a label for it. We kind of, I think, us personally and maybe as an industry also, they kind of got used to these words later on, maybe towards 2014 15 period afterwards. uh, so for us, I think how we got involved earlier is uh, when there was like these initial spurts of activity happening here and there. I think we also got involved at the right time, and we were involved in almost all the key events that happened in Colombo, and even outside Colombo. So a few to name is like the Google, what do you call that? Google Meetup, I think, Google I/O,
Yeah. Google
that was
IO.
organized by Mobitel. So Mobitel organized one of the biggest Google I/O meetups. They brought in, so they went kind of crazy on their first event, because for them also, I think it was like this entire aspect of social media and people following social media. It was kind of new to them, so they organized an event. Uh, 10,000 people walked in, unlimited pizza. So a Google event happens like that live conference, so it needs to be followed on live stream. So it was an overnight event. So it went overnight till the next day morning. So it was like huge screens, and things were live streamed, and in between breaks we had celebrities like Iraj and all these people coming and performing. And what was even crazy was the pizzas, pizza, free unlimited pizza for all of them, like unlimited pizza, unlimited coke. So these were the extremes that some of the sponsors went to. Dialogue did the same thing, because there was something called Tweet Up as well. They
Yes.
also took over some of these events, and they did it in grand scale. So I think we got involved in some of these events as official digital media partners at very early on, and that gave us a lot of credibility and exposure, where even we started getting involved in some of the serious events like ICTA driven events, like World Summit Awards in Sri Lanka, SARC Summit. It was also a good time, because most of the regional conferences were coming to Sri Lanka at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it gave us like access to this, and it was kind, we were like thrown into all of these magnificent things, and it was like rapid learning, what do you say, learning period for us. It was rapid exposure, rapid learning. It was crazy, crazy times.
Okay. So let's see. I think we have a comment from somebody. Uh, Nishanka. Nice to see you, Inosh. Good stuff, Amita Gamuge. Okay, Nishanka, thank you very much. I know you had your You also had a live event in the evening from Zero Plastic, and then probably just after that he's joining us. Thank you for coming. And then my next question: you also have been, talking about startups. So since there were events, so there were startups anyway. I mean, later on you would have figured out the name. There were startups, and you got involved with different roles that you played. Maybe you were a mentor. You remember your first role in a startup other than being a sponsor for digital media?
I think from very early on, we directly went ahead as digital media partners. Even digital media partner, I remember one of the events. I think ICTS event. Until that, we were just going as partners, event partner.
Yeah.
But I think when ICTA called us for the very first event, which was I think SARC Summit, um, and they asked us, okay, what is the title that we're going for? This was new to us, so we didn't know, okay, what is a title. So again, since we we were the young boys and we were able to access people and say, okay, could you explain us what the title means and how do we go about it? We asked directly the person who was signing the contract for us at ICTA. So even that person was very helpful and told. That person directly told, okay, I see you guys have a lot of potential, so I'm giving you this opportunity. And then also explained us the process of, okay, what is the title, how this contract happens, and all of this. Game was kind enough to help us with that. And then we realized, okay, we need to go with the title. So I remember having a discussion inside the team, coming up with the title, and we were thinking, okay, should we go as New Age Media partner?
Okay.
And then finally, I think
Fancy.
we yes, fancy titles, and then finally we came down to, okay, digital media partner. I remember this very well because we originally thought of this because we didn't have any reference. So we came up with, okay, let's go with digital media partner. It sounds good. It sounds very professional. Let's go with it. Probably, I think that same title, I think eventually it also became, not through us, but eventually by default, it became like a default partner title for lots of people. But I think the very first people who used digital media partner in an event would have been us. As we went to the ICTA event, and that was quite new. I think we were quite proud of having that title.
Yeah, of course. So we have a question from Dr. Lasit Gunawardena, Jawadanpur University. Good evening, Amita and Inosh. In Sri Lanka, we have quite a number of talented students at tertiary level. Most of the undergraduate projects are simply that and do not proceed to the next level up to the startup or commercialization due to numerous reasons. What do you think can be done to improve the status quo from the industry perspective? I think you have seen this happening, and you also have seen some of the startups crossing that barrier. So you want to add something here. It will help a lot of university students as well.
So I think this is definitely, it is a very open subject, which is, we can debate because it's not like, a very clear answer. But, if we have to put it in a nutshell, I think, it needs to, the entire idea of entrepreneurship needs to be inculcated not as a subject, but as a way of life from the very early stage. Because, it starts with, the culture, it starts with your parents, it starts with the society, then even the school you go to, even whether a student is allowed to ask questions from the teacher, that is also like a quality of an entrepreneur, to being encouraged to be curious. If, let's say, every other aspect doesn't support entrepreneurship, let's say you're not allowed to ask questions, you're not allowed to challenge a lecturer, you are only told what to do, you are only told to follow the book, you're only put through an exam, which a written exam, which is like you just have to like memorize and write. I was going to use another word, but memorize and just put it out. uh, if everything else is still the same and not changing, but then you introduce a separate subject only with the theory aspect of entrepreneurship, I don't think it's right for us to expect results out of it. Because it's not about subject, it's not about you go out and do XYZ and then you become an entrepreneur. It's not about you go follow step 1 2 3 4 and then your startup is a success. It's more like, okay, that quality of, okay, try and fail and try. Are you curious? Are you determined? That will eventually make you an entrepreneur. Even if you don't know your theory, it doesn't matter. If you have the quality of, determination, and if you have the quality of, okay, I see a problem here, how do I solve it? If you have that determination, and sometimes these words are used, too mainstream, like, passion and drive and everything, but true to the words meaning itself, if you have those, that will take you to becoming a better entrepreneur than having followed a course or doing, certain subjects or listening to one motivational YouTube speech.
Okay.
Maybe this.
Interesting. So it's more or less a holistic thing. Eventually,
Yeah,
it should be addressed at a little bit of a grassroots level before they even come to
yeah.
the university. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
multiple things. It's not just one. It's multiple. It's the family, the society, the culture, and everything has to change. Everything has to adopt this, and it has to adopt at almost at once. So which means it's not going to happen overnight. But that mentality. Let's say if this generation starts, maybe one or two generations down the line, it'll start seeing these changes. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Practical answers. Dr. Lassie, thank you very much for the question. So my next question is, you have seen the startup ecosystem growing in Sri Lanka, right? So you want to say something about that growth of the ecosystem? And I'm sure there wouldn't have been an ecosystem at the beginning, right? I really don't know whether there's an ecosystem even now, but what did you see over a period of time?
So I think early on when people joined into doing startups, it was more of, I think, from my perspective, the people that I saw quite early who were getting into this, they did it because they wanted to solve a problem, and they were more determined that they need to do something, and they were kind of figuring out how to do it.
Mm,
Maybe towards the midpoint of, maybe, I don't know, something like 15, 16, 17, maybe let's say after 2016-17 period, I think the idea of being an entrepreneur, the idea of having a startup started trending much more than why you are even starting a startup. The purpose kind of started fading away.
mm,
And then we started seeing a lot of people, a lot of undergraduates, a lot of young people wanting to start a startup uh, because they just wanted to become a founder, or because they wanted to have a title as entrepreneur. And sometimes it was just like, you open a Facebook page and you call yourself an entrepreneur, because hey, you have a Facebook page, you are now an owner of a business, or you, if you sell one or two stuff online, and then you have an Instagram page, essentially you define yourself as an entrepreneur. So thing is this, it's like, it's not wrong to do that, it's good to be aspiring, but I think that idea was kind of fading. But I think now people are again realizing, as of recent, I see a lot of really promising startups, and I think, as an entire ecosystem also, I think we are growing. That's something positive to see. There is a lot of people doing a lot of good work, and I think definitely it's not, uh, there is no one single person who can do all of this. So it's not one organization, or it's just not just one government organization or a private entity. Nobody can do this on their own. It's multiple people has to come together, and they need to work cohesively, and we see that happening now. There is a lot of good intentions, there is a lot of good work happening. So right now it's like, fingers crossed in terms of, okay, let's make sure that all of these efforts will eventually benefit the country as well, the country, the economy, and not maybe produce good talent here and then they eventually go out of the market. I think
yeah.
maybe to a
True.
certain extent even we are guilty of, we are now looking at outside Sri Lanka for better opportunities, because there is so many other, not just market itself, there are so many other barriers in terms of ease of doing
True.
business, in terms of mentality, in terms of business ethics. There's so many things. So eventually when you weigh the scale, it's like, okay, at least from our perspective, we are not forgetting our country. We are still looking at, okay, how do we come back here? We are trying to figure out how to betterment the service and then come back here. But lots of people might not even think that. For me, I think maybe as a team we are thinking is because we like to stay back here physically. But
True.
people who maybe start getting an aversion to the country and they don't even want to stay here, For them, nothing is stopping them. They will just get out of the country and do the amazing work elsewhere across the borders.
True, true. Thank you very much. That's a detailed explanation. So we have Maxwell. He says, yes, true, entrepreneurship should be in DNA. It is difficult to teach, but certain skills can be taught. Most of the entrepreneurship courses provide examples of entrepreneurs, but all of them have not followed any entrepreneurship courses to become entrepreneurs. That is the reality. Yeah. So,
That is a reality. That question has the answer. So once you do something, you can create and you can analyze it and you can say what you did. But
yes,
you can't before doing something. See that's weird about it. Let's say for example, if for example this is like I usually take the example of a swimming, right? For example, let's say you are like pushed into a river and then you do not know swimming, but now you have to purely out of survival instincts you have to cross this because maybe you cannot come back. You have to because the current is pulling you the other side. You need to figure out a way to get to the other side of the shore, other side of the what do you call it, okay, the
river,
shore.
river.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the river. Let's say without knowing swimming you somehow figure out, you just pat your feet and your hands and you end up getting there. Now you have survived, so which means now you have lived to tell a story. After surviving, let's say the entire community is on the other side, they clap you and they ask you how do you do it. Now you can analyze and tell all the stories. This is my theory, my 3-step theory of what you need to do. What do you think? My process, what I followed. When you jump in, think. I'm just telling, right? You can come up with all these detailed analysis of how to do it, but somebody else is thrown into that. Imagine, soon after everybody listens to this, entire lecture of manual and notes, and okay, you purely get it. Now you just push the other person in. Nothing is going to happen. Again, survival instincts kick in. They have to figure out how to get there. So, thing is, having a rule book, having guidelines is good.
yeah,
Observing people who have done it before, it's good to get cues from them on what worked. Because I won't say everything works against you. If you follow certain cues of what people who have succeeded have done, definitely it will help you because then it will reduce the time that you have to go through the same experience to learn that.
yeah,
So you can, let's say, follow multiple people. Famous examples, like usually lots of people like to follow, is people like Richard Branson and uh, people like that. I think so. For me, I follow Richard Branson a lot. So for me, every time Richard Branson's anything, any quote comes up, or any of his life, I always think about his risk taking abilities. His
yeah,
risk taking, not abilities, his craving for taking risk.
yeah.
Uh,
Even even
that's
even last trip to the space. He
exactly.
just went there.
Ex- Exactly. So if you ask him before he took his balloon ride, or he sailed out into the sea, he wouldn't have had a manual. He just had pure gut instincts of I can do it. This is how I'm going to do it. Maybe after he
Exactly.
comes back, he will tell a story of how he did it. He can write 10 books and people will buy to read it. But
Interesting.
uh, yeah,
Yeah. So with that, my next question, I want to ask you. You also have experienced and being part of a lot of meetups,
yeah.
hackathons, right? I would like to ask you the role of meetups and hackathons in developing a startup ecosystem.
So, see, that is what actually plays one of the biggest roles in developing a startup ecosystem. Because if you actually look at it, when you look back, let's say of how the startup ecosystem evolved, even with this same discussion that we had, we refer back to what we did, where we were, what were the events, what were the things that we spoke, who did we connect with, things like that. So stories and connections is what actually builds an entire ecosystem to make things happen. It's like the facilitating factor for connections to happen, for for stories to be told, for people to be inspired, and that keep that engine running. Because at the absence of this, imagine if everything is isolated, there is no storytelling, nobody gets to know what other people are doing, there is no platforms where you get to meet different people, and you're limited with your maybe just your neighbors and your few friends that you're limited with them. Out of them, whether you find a better team, sometimes not. Even if you find a team, are they competent enough? You don't know. Even if it's a competent team, when you're doing stuff, can there be exciting partnerships and synergies happening? You won't have the opportunities. So what brings all of this together is like things like meetups. Meetups, meetups will include everything like hackathons and Zoom calls. Virtual version of our meetups is the Zoom calls that we are having.
Yeah.
And I think one of the saddest thing that we had to do even for Spike Meetup. So Spike Meetup is one of the longest running startup meetups in Sri Lanka. It's been happening for about 6 to 7 years now,
Yeah.
non-stop. I think we kind of took a small break for the lockdowns. So Spike Meetup is purely known for you come to Barefoot Garden Cafe on an evening, Tuesday evening around 6 o'clock. You just get yourself a glass of beer, network
Yeah.
with people, get to know people. You just share some of your contacts, cards, and everything, and just be able to network with people, and then maybe one or two people will stand up and give uh, some of their learnings in terms of stories.
Yep.
And usually it happens for about 1.5 hours. I think once lockdown happened, we didn't have that luxury of having physical meetups. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think even that on a virtual level, when we are doing it, there is some sort of activity happening. Imagine we are not having that. There wouldn't be any connection. There wouldn't be updates of what people are doing. There wouldn't be these sparks of
Simply look
activity
at, I
happening
mean, why are you here today? It's simply because I met you at
at startup
startup
weekend
weekend.
in Jaffna.
Yeah, I mean that was the first startup weekend happening, and then
Exactly.
here we got to know each other thanks to
Exactly.
Sharanyan, and then
Exactly.
here we are. You are on my show now. Yeah, so
Exactly.
and we are missing those great events
Oh,
at
of
the moment.
course. Of course.
And then here we have Sajivan, and he says that's an interesting example of you crossing the river.
Probably might have happened to me, so that's what I told that.
Okay, now my next question is why startups and tech is always seen together?
that's,
Always when
that's
you talk about startups, there's tech in it, there's IT in it. It looks
yeah.
like you can't have a startup without tech part in it. You wanna uh, maybe clear this confusion?
So I mean, it's like tech is usually seen as the enabler. So when you look at startups, we consider startups which are able to something which is an innovative new solution which has the ability to scale, that we consider as a startup. So maybe inside the startup world we have maybe a fine-tuned definition of a startup is something that is enabling you to scale up beyond your maybe physical means, and beyond boundaries, geographical boundaries, and you can exponentially create value. So
Yeah.
that usually is enabled by technology. So it's not like exclusively technology, but usually almost 80%, 90% of the time, technology is that ingredient which makes it happen. Usually most of the startups which are considered a proper startup is a tech startup. It doesn't mean that it's in the tech industry. That is also another misconception. Doesn't mean that startups are from the tech industry. The real meaning is any industry, the startups using tech can have that additional proponent of being exponentially creating value, uh, reaching across
Innovation,
borders,
innovative.
innovation. Yeah, I think one of the discussions, I mean, one of the examples that we spoke earlier was how Google, it's still a search bar. It's just one functionality. It's still a search bar. But from early 90s to 2000s to they're getting into $1 trillion valuations, is just being a search bar. That value creation is that exponential multiplication of helping the entire humanity. Same thing with Apple, in terms of, okay, earlier Walkmans can hold 12 songs, then you can hold iPods can hold 2000 songs, and now you can hold like 60 million songs. It's
Yeah.
enabled by technology. So usually it's considered that any startup which is solving a problem with the tech component in it, or rather with an exponential scalability component in it, which is enabled by tech. That's usually why the misconception of all startups are tech comes into play, but it's not. Startups can be non-tech as well, or startups can be
That's
in any industry and use a bit of tech.
That's a great explanation. Thanks. Right now, this is an interesting question. I don't know whether I should be asking this question from you. The role
My
of
God.
media.
Yeah.
the role of media in startup ecosystem, in developing a startup ecosystem.
So I think the best thing is, the Chinese shut down crows, thinking that it's a nuisance for them, and then after a while they realized, okay, the entire city is full of garbage. And they realized, okay, they need to bring back the crows, and they started importing them. I think crows or pigeons or some story like that. You can Google. Same with media. I mean, you completely ban media and you have no activity. You will realize what you are missing, because every single thing, maybe how it is used now is kind of different in terms of, let's say, it's like a knife, right? You can use it for good purposes, to cut vegetables, to eat healthy, or you can use it to cut people.
Stab someone.
Again, eventually to steal money and eat better. I don't know. uh, so it's like a double-edged sword. Same thing with media as well. Sometimes people don't see that value in media is because media is also used for the wrong purposes. It's gossip stuff, it's fear mongering stuff. You always get into any form of media, and you always see political disorder, and you see things, economy is crashing down. You see murder 2 lanes from where you live, and that is not helping you in any way. It's not creating progress. But at the same time, if you look at the good side of media, of if you get to know how connections spark. I have many stories I can tell. How some of the stories that we put, some random person out of some random other country, they suddenly read it and they say, hey, sometimes they usually even reach out to us personally. They search us, they look us at on LinkedIn, they drop a message and say, we read this interesting story. Is there a possibility you can put us in touch with this founder? Is there a
Wow.
possibility you can put us with this startup? And there are quite a few. I think I already have, even just with the effort that we are doing, we have a handful of startups which has got funded, which has got partnerships, and things like that. So what I'm saying is, okay, if this is multiplied, let's say multiple people do it, or if all media has an aspect of how can we exponentially create value through media, and create stories, create inspiration, create connections, and also media is also like a look back. When you look back at history, what happened is usually documented through media. You don't have, like, you won't personally have like a journal of all what happened in the industry. You might have your personal diary. But usually when you look back, it's usually the papers or some documentary which was done in the TV. But those media is dying. So the new age media is usually articles or some videos, documentaries, things like that. So even media also, it's not the technology. Media will evolve. It will go into multiple new types of technology, but usually the industry which provides information out is considered media. So if you only think about TV is the media, no, TV is not media. TV is a medium, not media.
Yeah.
Same thing what we are doing. So don't criminalize media because TV is giving you bad information. Or newspapers. Yeah.
Interesting. So we have Yovin. Hello, and then hey Nosh, good to see you here. Yovin Lekamge. I hope you
Yes.
you know
Some
you know.
some of the early people that we met, back in the day. Yovin and all, we have been to many events together. Uh, I see a lot of friends who have joined us today.
Yeah. So probably my last question for you: if someone is getting into media, in your case, it's let's say digital media. I mean, as a maybe someone wants to come as a founder to start something, or somebody might get in to do a job, right? Any inputs, any advices you want to give? We have seen, okay, it's not only the pre-pandemic era. Now we are also going through pandemic. Maybe we'll have to go through it for another 1 or 2 years. So it's VUCA world. Any
Yeah.
advices you want to give?
So I think it's very simple. You shouldn't be doing it for reasons which are not ideal for starting a startup. In terms of, okay, you shouldn't be starting a startup just because you can add that into your CV, or you can put that on your social media profile, or you can look socially acceptable because you're doing something which nobody understands. So things like that is like, you need to figure out why you're doing it, because the moment you jump into entrepreneurship, it's an entire different lifestyle. People who jump into it will realize it. But until you take your first step and actually jump, thing is this: you can't even put one foot in, because then it's not going to work. You need to dive in, like you need to like properly immerse. If it's the river example, you need to properly dive in and immerse yourself. That's when you have actually got into the industry, or as you know, got into the decision of becoming a founder and entrepreneur. But if you do it for the wrong reasons, you won't have that, you won't have the energy or motivation for you. Even if you're struggling, you won't have the energy to kind of, reach out even for a straw. Even if a straw is floating, they say, like, somebody's drowning, they will even reach for the straw. But let's say you are completely exhausted, you won't even have enough energy to reach out for a straw. But there are
Yeah.
people who even have, that 1 ounce of motivation or energy or motivation to get out of that. They will hold that straw and, survive. So get in for it for the right reasons, because it's not as glamorous as you see it from outside. And especially since you ask, for people to get into media, media is very challenging industry. So it's from our perspective, since we have seen how it works, it's quite challenging, because monetizing content. Because let's say when you're going into doing a business, the ultimate goal is, okay, how do you monetize a service, how do you create value for the exchange of money. So usually the idea of, monetizing content is not, I would say, not properly matured yet. Because
Yeah.
part of the internet is free, part of the services you get is free, but then there is also another part which, you get to pay for. So then always the question is, okay, is do I need to pay for this? Can I think this also starts with, how we perceive this. When there is one aspect of you, and especially as Asians, when you see a movie, a full blockbuster movie out there, and you're immediately thinking, okay, how can I crack, download the pirated copy? That means you haven't accepted that you need to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right now, one of the things that I really try to, follow myself is, so I don't have a Netflix or any subscription. I don't have a TV at home. I don't have any of the subscriptions, purely for the reason that I want to be very conscious of what I watch and what I read and things like that. So sometimes I do get distracted by connection got lost.
I lost you for a few seconds.
Connection got lost, Amita?
Yeah, yeah. I'm back. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Connection got
Yeah,
lost?
yeah. Maybe there was a bit of a glitch. I didn't hear the last two, three sentences.
Yeah.
One of the things that you are trying to do.
Yeah. So one of the things that I try to do consciously is that, even if, some good movie comes out and then I want to watch it, I go and consciously I subscribe to one of these services. I watch the movie and then unsubscribe. So because I want to, because I am from a content industry and I know the pain that, a movie director goes through creating something, a producer goes through creating something. I also know of on a very small scale what a writer goes through to, produce an article. What, like, people who take videos, within our team, like, the I appreciate every single person who's taking the photograph, to who's taking the video clips, to who's writing, who's editing, who's doing the interviews. Every single thing is like a world of its own. There's so much of nuanced activities going into it. From outside,
Yeah,
people don't see that. They only see, okay, random bunch of words put together. It's an article now. Okay, now this is okay. What's so new about this? But
yeah,
usually, there's so much behind it. Like, the SEO in terms of how do you pitch it, in where this
yes.
goes out, how do you promote it. Some of the articles that we have written, some of the old like tech companies, like, 99x WSO2, some of these people still use this in their decks. They refer to some of our old articles, and we are really proud of it, because, the effort that we put in long time ago is still being used for,
Yeah,
purposes. Some of the startups use it for, their pitch decks. So
yeah,
we are really proud of it, because once we kind of give them an outline of, what they are doing. So it's like, by doing a story, they get to know who they are. They get to know how to better pitch their product than they were doing it themselves before.
true.
So it's more of a discovery process for some startups who do stories.
Interesting. So Thank you, Enosh. That's really a good way of explaining, So you should know before you enter the industry. At least you have to be cautious. Yeah, you just gave that input to everyone. Whether you want to start something or whether you want to even join, know the pains, know the risk, and come in. So that ends our session. So today we have Maxwell, who will walk away with the book, a book courtesy of Pick a Book, and I know he also is a writer and who writes a lot and even publish in international. I mean, he has one of his books in Amazon where it is making money for him. People can download and read and all that. So today's book is will be given to him by courtesy of Pick a Book. So go to Pick a Book. It's www.pickabook.club. See how books can transform you. So Inosh, it was great having you here from that. The run that we ran from Vaunia to here, it's a long distance, but then I'm so happy that I have been able to document your story and then what you have witnessed along the way in building up Sri Lankan ecosystem. If someone is going to write a book about the growth of Sri Lankan startup ecosystem, I'm sure your name and what you have done by your team also would be documented somewhere. So
Would be honored.
so thank you very much for coming, and then we'll meet all of you, whoever is joining us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll see you again with another exciting episode next week.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amita, for having me. Really
Yes.
lovely chat. I didn't even feel 1 hour going. I thought we are at half an hour mark. Thank you so much. Thank you for all
Thank
the
you
all
so
the people
much.
who joined as well. All right. Have a
Yeah,
good evening.
okay.
See you.
And stay
Bye.
safe. Bye.